What happens when your worst fear becomes your reality? Hi, I'm Brent Cassidy. Welcome to the Nightmare Success In and Out podcast, where we explore how to overcome your fears and nightmares and set yourself free. We're going to be exploring this topic with guys I was in Leavenworth with and others who survived their own nightmare. These stories can be inspiring, sometimes sad. There's some humor, but hopefully you can come away with a nugget of something that'll help you knock down some of the prisons you built up in your own mind. All right, Nightmare Success In and Out listeners, welcome back. Welcome back. I'm excited. I've got, and for those listening to the show, I love everybody's, I've gotten a flood of new reviews and stuff. That's huge because it helps the show. But don't forget to like, subscribe, comment. Big deal. Helps the show. I've got a great guest, Ginjer Wulff. Ginjer Wulff, fascinating story because, I mean, it's, when I was talking to her on the phone the other day, it was like one thing and then another thing. And then how she going to survive this and how she's going to survive that. And then how does she get out of this and what happens then? It's a crazy story. But she struggled with addiction, as a lot of people do. And her nightmare was as she got behind the wheel of a vehicle while she was under the influence. And it resulted in a hit and run accident. And she was sentenced to Florida State Prison for the incident. And, you know, Ginger's got a lot of life stories, including, as I was reading about this and watching the Ian Bick show, an inappropriate relationship with a correctional officer, which I can't wait to find out about that. But she's gotten into acting and modeling. She travels all over the place. It's crazy how far and wide she goes telling her story, trying to help people through telling her story. I can't wait to unpack all this. But before we do, I want to welcome and recognize our show sponsor, Auto Plaza Direct. You know, who likes spending a couple of weekends walking car lots, looking for a car? Then you spend 4 to 5 hours in the dealership to buy a car. It's kind of like having a root canal appointment. Well, there's a better way. Take away all the pain and hassle of getting a car. It's called Auto Plaza Direct. They are your personal car concierge. Just tell them the car you want, what you can pay, and they'll go find that car for you. They'll negotiate your best price. They also offer you warranties and financing. It's all full service. Go to autoplazadirect.com to get started with your personal car concierge, the new hassle-free way, the car buying experience you deserve. Autoplazadirect.com. Tell them that Brent from Nightmare Success sent you. Ginjer, welcome in. And as we sit here, Ginjer, you are at a charging station with your Tesla as we are doing our interview. And it's what takes about 45 minutes to charge that Tesla up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and Auto Plaza Direct also does that kind of stuff. They go out and find electric cars. In fact, Don Davis was driving an electric car the other day when I saw him. So, Ginjer, you do travel all over the place. We were just talking about that. Where's some of the places you've been in the last few weeks?
The last few weeks, Arkansas, California, basically Southern California. Before that, it was in Destin. A few weeks before that, it was in New York, a month ago. It was in Colorado a couple weeks before that.
And you're traveling around, you're in the acting business, trying out and doing things for, in fact, I think you said you were going to audition for a movie after we get done with our interview here.
Yeah.
So Ginjer, can you walk us back into what little Ginjer was like growing up as a kid and worlds you were living in? Because when we were talking on the phone, I was just in awe of the fact of what you had to go through as growing up as a kid.
So I felt like I had a pretty normal childhood up until I got, a little older. When I was probably like 10 years old, I realized that my family wasn't like other families, in the way of like toxicity. There was a lot of like verbal abuse, mental abuse. My parents had trauma that they never worked through, they never dealt with, and it really affected who they were. as people, you know.
Yeah.
Uh,
Was was your how many siblings did you have with you in this world that you were in?
so I had two older brothers. One was 6 years older than me. One was 7 years older than me.
Okay, so you were the baby of the family.
Yes.
So when you said you kind of found out around 10 years old that you had this toxic environment, was it by going and being around other friends' houses and spending the night and that type of thing, or was it just you were like, holy shit, this is really messed up?
I think it was I just had this deep sense of other people don't have like other parents don't treat their kids this way. I had a lot of like core beliefs on, you know, what a parent should and shouldn't be as, you know, a young child that had never been a parent.
Yeah,
Um, so I think you know, once I just looked at the family system, it's kind of like looking at a drug addict from the outside and not, why can't you just be normal? Why
yeah.
can't you just be normal? Right. Um, and
Did they
I
work? Did both
Yeah,
parents work in the
yeah.
home? Yeah,
My dad owned his own business. My mom was actually disabled. She fell and broke her back when I was like 2. So most of my
yeah,
memories of my mom is like not. I don't really remember spending a lot of time with her as a small kid. I know
yeah,
that like they had me, like they never lost custody of us. They never physically abused us. It was more of I watched a lot of verbal abuse between my parents, a lot of like shaming, a lot of like narcissism
yeah,
on one side, and then basically them just reliving situations that I know that they had experienced as children.
yeah.
Um, so my
So
mom,
is the other part of your world, because I guess some of your, you'd be at home. What was your school life like?
school was great for me. I was a really strong student. I read a lot as a child. So I never had a hard time in school. I really enjoyed it because it was a reprieve from home because I got praise at school for, you know, being able to do what I was asked to do.
So that's you kind of thrived in that environment, being out of the house and being at the school and being a good student, being recognized by. I mean, did you have teachers and things that kind of helped you along as
Yeah.
sort of
Yeah,
like
for sure.
mentors?
I always went to public school, but like I still to this day credit some of my high school teachers for like me basically being alive because I had somebody to talk to about things. And like I was super scared as a teenager. I never wanted anybody to like call CPS. I didn't want the police to come to the house. At one point my guidance counselor actually called the police, like right when I was supposed to graduate, because I showed up like the day before graduation. I was so sick I couldn't like stand up. I couldn't function, throwing up everywhere. She couldn't even have a conversation with me. But I was only one of my family to actually graduate. So even though I missed like all the school my senior year, I had a scholarship that was academic and was getting, I was going to graduate, I was going to do a diploma. So I wanted to
Yeah.
be there. And I really should have been in the hospital. And she basically called the police and told the police to go out there to make sure that I knew that whether or not they wanted to take me to the hospital, that I had the right to go and be treated, whether they got the bill or not.
And what was the situation, Ginger?
I
We
don't,
talked about this, but with being
so I
sick
had a,
and
yeah, I had a heat stroke at like JROTC camp and the summer before I hit my
yeah,
senior year. I'd also experienced trauma a couple years before that that had never been dealt with or talked about. So I don't know. There was a lot of confusion on what was actually going on, but my symptoms were essentially like I started having chronic kidney issues. I started throwing up a lot, and they told me like I had to go to the hospital from like ROTC camp. They told me like you had a stroke. You had a heat induced stroke. Like you had all these things change in your body. Like you overheated your car and continued to drive and drive and drive. Like you need to
mhm.
take time off of work and you do this. And I was like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. Um, and then I started having these medical issues where I'd throw up. I had chronic stomach pain. I had started having like really bad body pains, and
Mm.
I would cycle in and out of the emergency room essentially because my parents would have
And what
insurance.
would they say? What would the people in the emergency room say?
It was kind of like the same. thing over and over where they'd treat the symptoms, and then they would do CAT scans, MRIs, and they'd say, like, sometimes I'd be in like mild kidney failure, mild
Mm,
liver failure, because I'd been sick for, a week without
yeah.
medical treatment. Um, it was a lot of, you need to go see a specialist, you need aftercare. The emergency room, they're legally required to make sure that you're okay. And I think they did the best job that they could.
Yeah.
I was like 17, about a couple weeks shy of being 18 years old, kind of like at the height of this.
Yeah.
Senior in high school who had been like totally healthy prior to this heat stroke incident, right?
Mm,
So they had theories, eventually they took my gallbladder out, when I was a couple years later. They told me I had something called gastroparesis, which basically is paralysis of the stomach, and you throw up. It's almost like catching food poisoning, like over and over, because your stomach doesn't like process things normally. I honestly don't know if any of the diagnoses were accurate. I know I still struggle with like nausea and vomiting issues. It's not nearly as bad. I know I still struggle with chronic pain. There's like lupus and stuff in my mom's family, and a bunch of cancer and like weird stuff like that, but they never actually found any of that in me. If they
wow.
ever, you know what I
That's
mean?
wild. And so what happened to you, Ginger, after you graduated from high school? What was your next step?
I mean, theoretically, I was supposed to go to college, and then I took time off because I was sick all the time. Like, I missed 135 days of my senior year of school. We were only in school for 155 days that year because that was the year of, I think, Gene hit St. Augustine, so we had like a week off of school or something from it. Um, but either way, it was I graduated 2005. But so I felt like, well, dude, like that might have flew in high school. That's not going to ride on a scholarship. It's not going to ride in big boy school.
Hmm.
Um, I was accepted to FSU. I went out there and checked it out for a couple of days, and my dad they ended up in a situation where they thought they were going to permanently end up with my brother's kids, my middle brother's kids, and they kind of freaked out. My dad overreacted, and I felt like I should kind of be home with them. Plus, I was kind of scared to be off on my own because I was having these medical issues and I didn't have any money, and you
Hmm.
know, it just seemed like a failure waiting to happen. So I kind of just hung around St. Augustine, and I didn't really do a whole lot with my life. I was cycling in and out of the emergency room a lot for, I would say, the next 2 years. I
How
started with
did
a
you how did you fall into the addiction part of things?
basically that way. Was every time I go in the emergency room, I'd be having these chronic pains. They give me, it started with the Zofran. It started with different stomach medicines, Reglan, stuff like that to help. Nothing helped. Started giving me opioids IV. And then basically once I hit to where I was old enough, to where I was a legal and adult, I was old enough in the state of Florida to go get pills, they immediately referred me out. And it made sense to me because it was cheaper than a specialist. And I'm like, they kept saying, well, this medicine will work, you'll feel better. And when I would go through the emergency room, they would give me these medicines, I felt a lot better. So like they know what they're talking about. This
Yeah.
works,
Yeah. Right.
and then within, I would say, a couple
Did you
years.
feel, but Ginger, did you feel like you were getting addicted, or was it just like I'm just taking this medicine because that's what they're telling me to do, and I'm supposed to feel better with it?
So I woke up on my 18th birthday with my first sign of withdrawal because I'd cycled in and out of the emergency room so much. I didn't have any take home prescriptions at that point.
Yeah.
Um, but I didn't know what I was experiencing. I thought I had the flu because my birthday is like 2 days after Christmas.
Yeah.
Uh, and it took me a while, and my brother insisting that, hey, you've been, getting a lot of meds lately. Like and my brother already had an oxy problem at this point. I didn't really understand.
And
He
you
had
knew
some,
that. You kind of knew that.
I knew he was going through something with drugs. I didn't understand what oxy dependency looked like,
Yeah.
or opioid dependency, I should say. Um, but it,
And
it
that
just,
time period that you're talking about was when everything was at its height.
yeah, it's 2005.
Yeah.
So, it was kind of, I just happened to be the right demographic and with the right issues for doctors to think that it was a viable solution for me. And then, like I said, when I had relief, it made sense, I guess, to everybody to continue to give me the only thing that seemed to give me any relief.
Hmm. So when you are going through this cycling of being sick and taking, getting addicted to these opioids, what's going on around you? Have you gotten into a job? Are you in a relationship? Like, what's happening?
So I had two jobs while I was in high school. I worked at a toy store and then I worked for Polo Ralph Lauren. Um, and I actually ended up working. I quit one of them and worked at a restaurant for a while too. So I always had a job. I started
Always
working in
working.
eighth grade. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a job when I was 13. So it was never that I was unemployed, but it came to a point where I wasn't. Oh, I went from being an amazing, dependable, awesome employee to like you could count on me to call out or to come in and work for a couple hours and then not be able to complete the shift because I would get sick and need to go.
Mm, wow.
So, and again, I personally believe, looking back on it, that the opiates contributed to that. I also, this might sound crazy, I still think that there's a small part of my brain that when I get physically ill, where like my muscles seize up and I'm nauseous and I'm throwing up, where like I have to ask myself, like, is my brain making this worse than it actually is because it thinks it's going to get some opioids? And I haven't had opioids except for I had a surgery where I had a bone graft to get I
Hmm.
got implants, dental
Those
implants.
look great for those on YouTube. You can see Ginger's teeth.
Yeah, they look like
Way
I
to
was
be,
chewing on
Ginger, with a
rocks
nice,
before.
nice teeth.
Um, but yeah, I had to get a bone graft because when I was in the first grade, we went to Busch Gardens and I got shoved into a pole and my parents like it chipped both of my teeth. My parents got the root canal and they never got like permanent fillings or crowns put on because they didn't have
Yeah.
insurance. So I basically had temporary fillings in the back for like 10 years and then finally the work disintegrated. So the teeth were basically hollow and the bone was taking the force of the impact. So I had bone loss in my
God, that
face.
sounds horrible. Was it
Yeah.
painful?
I was only like 2 years sober when I went through this.
Oh gosh.
So they said they gave me 6 times the amount of Dilaudid that they'd ever given anybody else. I woke up while they were sewing my face shut. And I'm 2 years sober at this point.
Wow.
Yeah, it was
So
wild. But other than
I,
that, I haven't had any opiates or opioids in a long time. So, to eat for me, it's like, dude, it's been, 8 years. Like, I still have to ask
that's
my
a
brain,
long time.
is that
Yeah.
what's after? Like,
Yeah. But that's a long time. I mean, so let's take a step back though, because as you were walking through all this, it was when we talked the other day, it almost seemed like it was a haze of what you were living through.
I mean,
The day,
I never
what was
felt
that?
like it was hazy. I have a very clear memory of what happened. So
Yeah.
I don't know what you mean by a haze.
It felt like when we were talking about it that you were going from one point to the next point, and each time it felt like that there were times when you felt like you were escaping, getting out of it, but kind of getting pulled back into it.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. Um, I don't know that there's ever like an escape
Yeah.
from
No,
what
it's almost like it's a
I'm
mental thing that you think you're like when I think of an escape for someone who's in a bad situation, maybe it's school, maybe it's sports, maybe it's you know a new friend group, whatever that is.
right.
That's the kind of thing that. But Ginger, take us through how this nightmare for you happened. Like what
Where do
was
you want me to
happening in your
start?
life? What'd you say?
Where do you want me to start? You want me to
Well, I
start
mean, from where you were at the time, you
which
had
which time?
the- in the car, we had when
Should
you
we
had the
start
hit
with
and
the accident?
yeah, I mean, unless you want to back up from that.
No, that's fine. Um, so I had a 6-month-old baby, and I was at the point where I had a bunch of take-home prescriptions. And I made the decision based on self, to get behind a wheel because I had a need to go get a house key so I could get let into the house and go to sleep. Like it made no sense. It makes absolutely no sense looking back on it. And it took me years to understand that, like, I was not a victim of my circumstance. Like, I was the problem. Like, my thinking was the problem, you know? Um,
Which is
uh,
a big deal. I mean, it's hard to take responsibility in a situation where, you know, you it's traumatic and it's hard to deal with. It's hard to get around that to where, okay, I was dealing with a lot of things, but I put myself in a position to where it caused that.
yeah, I put myself in a position to not only be hurt, but to hurt others, and then did, you know? So, um, it, you know, I don't know. I knew I was going to prison though. Like, I knew that you don't hit people and leave and not go to prison. You know what I mean? So my brother had actually just come home from prison. Um so basically after the accident, I had all this, I already had like a lot of guilt and shame. I'm a typical Irish kid. Like, guilt and shame ran me as a child, and they still kind of do as an adult, right?
Yeah.
Um
But you
and
were
then
talking about Ginger, you know, you didn't drive that far away. I mean, I'm not making any excuses for anything, but you were within like a mile or so of where your house was. And when you and I were talking, you were talking about you weren't even sure what or if you had hit something when you rounded that corner.
So
You
I knew
thought
I
you hit a dog
I no, originally I thought I hit a mailbox.
mailbox.
But I thought, and then when I looked in the rear view, I saw a dog. So, and I didn't see anybody. So
Yeah.
I left. I was like, yeah, I'm not stopping. I'm not in my vehicle, which is again, I didn't, and like I should have got out for the dog. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, I saw him standing up, or so I felt like in my mind that was an excuse to, oh, he's going to be okay, because I cared more about myself at that point in time than I did about any of the casualties of my actions.
Right. And then as you go along, you get home, and is it someone that's at your work that tells you that they saw something on the TV, or how did that come
Yeah,
about?
so I saw on the TV at my mom's. I went out to my mom and dad's because I wanted to be able to call a friend, because I had somehow broken the windshield and I couldn't understand why the windshield was broken. So I took it to my mom and dad's. I was going to have someone come out because it's not my car. I just wanted to get the windshield fixed, and be done with it. That was my train of thought. And I get out there and I saw on the news that a girl had been hit right down the road from my house around the same time I was there. And that, depending on which witness you listened to, it could have been a vehicle that was similar to the vehicle I was driving. And I just know a God put on my heart. You said that she was walking her dog.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so after that, obviously didn't move forward with doing anything to the vehicle. I literally just wanted the vehicle off my parents' property because my dad owned a business, and I'd called a friend whose father was a prominent attorney in town and was like, hypothetically, if blah 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 happened and the vehicle that the crime was committed in was blah blah blah, the attorney basically told me, hey, that vehicle shouldn't be at your parents' house if you want to save their business, because Florida doesn't have an accessory law. Like, she might die, it might be a manslaughter
Mm-hmm.
thing. Well, and we didn't know it was a she at the time. We didn't know anything, just that somebody had been life flighted to the hospital. So it was like the day of.
Mm-hmm.
So I just kind of drove the car like down the road and just left it in the woods because I just didn't know what else to do with it. And I didn't want my parents to be involved because they weren't. Um,
I can't
yeah.
imagine. I mean, something like that happens so sudden. I mean, it's having to deal with what you would do. So, did the attorney tell you to go turn yourself in?
No, I was gonna call him back because he couldn't represent me, um, because there was a conflict somewhere with something. I can't remember why, but he couldn't represent me.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up I talked to my dad the next morning at like 6 o'clock in the morning, something like 5 o'clock in the evening. Um, And I called my dad then at like 2 o'clock in the morning because he gets up to go to work around that time or is at work at that time. And told him I did something terrible and I needed to see him. And I had a friend of mine drop me off at the store that he was servicing so I could talk to him and tell him what happened. And we both agreed like, hey, you got to turn yourself in. Like you need to call the police and tell them it was you. Um, we called an attorney, and the original attorney that I wanted to call was Alexander Christini, who actually ended up later being my attorney and then was my served as like a judge for something different later on. It was interesting. But my brother had used him and had managed to skirt consequences, because it wasn't, and this is going to sound real fucked up, right? But after this accident happened, I wanted to clear my conscience. I wanted to ensure the girl would be okay, which there was nothing I could do to do that. And I wanted to skirt consequences and make the consequences as light as possible for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we called this attorney. He didn't happen to be in office, and I guess my brother had called because I just wasn't. This accident happened in 2009, and I
Okay.
still can't talk about it without having an emotional reaction, right? So when all this was going on, and I'm on drugs at the time, you
Yeah.
know, um, I couldn't get the words out physically to have a conversation with somebody for, what was the best course of action.
Mm-hmm.
But ended up calling a different attorney. My family ended up calling a different attorney. Um, and we retained him, and he said, well, hey, we're gonna, or actually we didn't retain him at that point. He just said, hey, I can represent you, I can go with you to turn yourself in, I'll get a check at that point. We're gonna do it, this is Saturday morning, like 10 a.m. or like 8 a.m. He's like, hey, we're gonna do it like noon today. And then it went to, we're gonna do it like 3 today. And then it went to, well, they don't know anything, there's no lead investigator on the case yet, we're gonna wait till Monday and we're gonna turn you in Monday at noon. And he had basically, my mom was like, I told my dad told my brother told his girlfriend, and my dad told my mom, my brother's girlfriend told, like, I don't know how many people. But by like the end of the day, it kind of seemed like everybody in my small town.
It wasn't a secret, right?
Yeah. Um, you know, so my mom was like threatening to tell like my son's father, because I had a 6-month-old son, and like obviously I was gonna tell him something. I just didn't know what to tell him at this point. Like,
Mm-hmm.
um, and then other things like I worked at a doctor's fucking addiction specialist.
Mm-hmm.
The irony of that, right?
That is ironic.
Um, I worked for an addiction specialist doctor at the front desk, and I went up there to tell the girl that I worked with, like, hey, I'm not going to be in Monday. Had an accident. I need to go take care of it. And then she immediately, oh my God, that was you. We saw it on the news. And I was like, I don't know what to, I don't want you to think, because like I didn't, you know what I mean? Again, I was trying to minimize consequences.
Yeah.
Um, but she's like, just go. And I guess her
Plus,
husband
you were
was,
probably a little bit in shock, Ginger, weren't you? Just in general, just like, my God, what am I going to do? This
yeah,
is like, and it's kind of out there.
how
And
do
then
you
the whole
tell someone
anticipation of
that?
trying to figure out
Yeah.
if you're going to turn yourself in and when you're turning yourself in, it sounds like a
Yeah, well,
crazy
I knew
time
I was going to turn myself in. It was just the anxiety of, well, and then to
of
my
doing
attorney,
it.
the whole reason why my attorney told me to tell certain people was, listen, they might hold you. If they think
Mm-hmm.
she's going to die, they might hold you and it'll be a new charge.
Mm-hmm.
So,
That's scary
you
too.
might be in there. You're not going to bond out immediately, is kind
Yeah.
of what we thought. So
Yeah.
I was trying to, again, minimize consequences for myself and everybody around me. But hey, this might happen. I don't know. Let's like keep in mind that this could happen. And then that same night, I guess her husband called the police and told them that they knew who had done it. The police came out, I guess like Sunday morning at like 2 a.m., looking for the car, wanting to arrest me. And I just kind of cooperated. They told me that they would let me turn myself in if I cooperated, which I kind of felt like was bullshit. But it didn't make sense to me to not give them the car because I was planning on turning myself in, was kind of like my train of thought. And I'd
Yeah.
had no experience with law enforcement
Mm-hmm.
um, prior to this.
Mm-hmm.
So
So, Ginjer, what happens next? I mean, so you get
I go
taken
to
in.
jail. I get
How long does that
arrested.
take, though? I mean, like, is it? I mean, you go in. Do you bond out? Do
Yeah,
you
I
stay in
bonded
jail?
out. Never, no,
Okay,
I bonded out immediately. I
that's a
didn't even
big
get,
deal.
yeah, I didn't even get dressed.
Okay.
Um, so I bonded out. I was on bond for 2 years. I tried to get sober, but if nothing changes, nothing changes, right? And it
Yeah.
wasn't when I originally tried to get sober. We thought I was going to get sentenced immediately, and then we had a suppression issue because the whole way they obtained the car, I'd asked for an attorney a few times. Like immediately as soon as I got out there, I said that I wanted my attorney, and that's when they were like, "Well, hey, you said you're going to turn yourself in," because there was a phone conversation. They went to my son's father's house first, because that is where they knew that I lived because the lady I worked with at the addiction doctor had been over there before. So they told the police that I lived there. So the police originally went there looking for me. And then he called my son's father. I'd already told him what had happened. So he called me. It's like 2 in the morning. He's drunk as shit. And he's like, "Hey, the police are here. They want to know where the car is." And I'm on speaker. I don't know
Mm.
that. And I'm like, "Well, I mean, just tell them I'm not there. Like, I'm going to deal with it tomorrow." And I had the baby with me at my mom's. And he's like, "Well, they want to talk to you." And I was like, "All right, well, I don't want to talk to them."
Yeah.
Like, and he's like, I forgot what I said, but he said something. And he's like, "Oh, well, you're on speakerphone." So I hung up, fuck that. And then I went out on the roof because I knew they were coming to my parents' house next,
Mm-hmm.
and I just didn't know what to do. Um, so I sat on the roof, and they pulled up like 8 cars deep and came to the house. They parked on the edge of the property and walked up because I don't know why. I guess no trespassing signs. I don't fucking know why. Parents had a big piece of property,
Yeah.
but they walked up. And basically just told me that they knew that I was the person. And
It had to be. I mean, I know why you're reliving the experience of that happening. When they take you in, Ginger, and you bond out, and you said it took 2 years for this to get through the system.
yeah,
Um, where did you did you plea out or did you take
yeah,
it to trial? Yeah.
no, no.
So it took you
So
that long
that's
just for the
time.
plea to happen and to actually go through. Did you have an idea when you went to the sentencing hearing what you were looking for and
Yeah.
at for time?
So originally the state wanted me to do 2.5 years flat. No probation, no nothing. My attorney at the time, who ended up being Alexander Christini, felt like we could present mitigating circumstances because of the prescription, because of the fact that I was a person that had never had any type of legal history.
Mm-hmm. First time
Um,
offender.
yeah, uh, stuff like that. I guess he thought that the mitigating circumstances would be enough.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when by the time I got to court, he had been promoted to county interim judge. And in order to take that position, he had to relieve his cases. So we went from we have a suppression issue to, hey, you should just take what they're offering you, and just be done. Just be
Mm-hmm.
done with it. And I wasn't prepared for that because I got sober to be able to go to jail and live through the experience because I was trying to kill myself via pills after the accident because I didn't think I would survive jail. And like, I just had so much guilt.
Mm-hmm. Living with the guilt. Yeah.
Yeah.
Depression.
Yeah. And I felt like a normal person would be like, bro, I almost killed somebody because of my selfishness and because of these pills. I'm going to stop taking these fucking pills. And I
Mhm.
couldn't. I couldn't.
Mhm.
And I got sober for as long as I was physically away from the environment. When I came back, it was the same situation. I didn't have a vehicle. I didn't have a way to get back and forth. I had broken relationships. I had chronic pain. I had
Mhm.
the anxiety. I had prison looming over my head. I had all the same people calling that had been
Mhm.
calling before, that are people I'd known my whole life. You know what I mean? So it wasn't enough for me. But again, I thought I was coming home to basically be sentenced, so it would be smoother, easier transition, and that's just not what happened. And my life just progressively got worse. Around the time of the accident, I was doing Suboxone most days of the week, like 2 milligrams Suboxone a day, and then one day of the week or a couple times a month, I would get loaded on 300 milligrams of oxy. Um, and then it went from I'm not taking the Suboxone at all anymore to I'm just off and running, and now I've got 1,000 milligram habit a day by the time I was
Mm.
sentenced.
Wow. So he's being sentenced. What did they finally give you for a
Um,
sentence?
so I walked in with what I thought was a plea with a cap because I had a different attorney by the time for my sentencing because they promoted Christine to judge. So, and I wasn't a great what's the word? I wasn't a great advocate for myself, right? Like I'm
Yeah.
basically trying to avoid that this is even going on, even though it's always in my brain, like every second of the day.
Yeah.
Um, so like I get to court and I'm supposed to. I thought he was going to present my mitigating circumstances. He thought I was. I'm talking about my attorney. He thought
Mhm.
I was presenting them. So I get to court and basically have nothing to say to defend for
Defend
myself,
yourself. Yeah.
right? And the victim's father got up there and said, "What a terrible person I was," and I believed him, and I understood why he felt that way, and I just couldn't stop crying after that. And the judge didn't like that. She didn't like me at all. She told me before, that she didn't like my brother. She didn't like me. My brother had been in and out of jail, and they could never actually get him with like a drug trafficking charge. This is what I felt like they always wanted from him.
Mhm.
He would always manage to skirt his consequences, and
So
I
there
think,
you were.
yeah. Um, so they sentenced me to 3 years in DOC, 2 years on community control, and then they revoked my driver's license for life. So I had to
Wow.
basically win an appeal years later just to be able to drive.
Which is big. You told me about that when we were talking, how big a deal that was with.
Yeah, it
So,
changed my life.
yeah, I'm sure it did. Talking about changing your life and changing your world, what was life like walking into a woman's prison?
I mean, I didn't have any jail time ever. I was sentenced Tuesday morning, was processed Tuesday afternoon, Thursday evening they kicked my bunk to go to prison. So I was in solitary doing pills because I brought shit in because I was like, well, what are they gonna do? Send me to prison?
Hmm.
Like I was hoping to die that day, and not have to
Right.
go. Um, but I had horrible withdrawal like the first evening because I took
Hmm.
whatever I had left before they shipped me because I already knew that it wasn't you didn't want to play with going into prison.
Hmm.
Um, So by that evening, I threw up all over my bunk, couldn't get a bedroll because it was a holiday weekend or something. I don't know. So then I'm like sleeping on this plastic cut up, cracked mattress with no sheets or
Mm.
anything. And I'm like puking all over the place. And by that next Wednesday, that's Friday morning. By the next Wednesday, or no, Saturday morning, because I guess I got there Friday morning because I cooked the bunk Thursday night. Um, so by Wednesday, they had to black box me and send me to the local hospital, and I wasn't classified. So, hence the black box and the two armed guards is because they didn't know anything about me or who I was.
Hmm.
Um, but I was in kidney and liver failure, and they had to give me a central line through my leg because I was so dehydrated and so sick that they couldn't get any other vein.
Wow.
Um, After that, I went to the culinary dorm. I didn't even hit classification. They just stuck me in culinary. Um, and then eventually they gave me like a useless pass. No bending, no lifting, no pushing, no pulling, no standing because I had issues with my leg and my stomach and whatnot. So I finally pulled that after like, I don't know, 3 or 4 months in the kitchen. I pulled that to try to get out of there. And then they put me in admin and I worked in admin for a while. Um, Under the pretense that like, hey, you can't use your useless pass down here. Like, don't even try that shit. If you take this job, you're gonna do what we tell you to do. And I was like, okay, because it's a privileged job, you
Sure.
know. And I really liked it, and I worked there for like a month, and I really liked the lady that gave me the job, and I thought it was a great job. And the rap thing about the one officer had written this like limerick. It was supposed to be funny, and it was like supposed to be a stab at myself because I had written something prior to this in RNO, reception and orientation, about this girl that rapped. She was like this bigger white girl that had a trailer park tattooed on her arm. You know how hard you got to rep for the trailer park to get it tattooed
That's
on
a hard
your
rep
arm,
there. Yeah.
bro? You live in that. Like, so I thought we were going on 8 Mile, so I wrote this like rap battle where like I dissed her because I thought she was gonna do the same to me, and she cried and basically told me that I had a horrible mouth and I'd be a perfect like love interest for this officer that everybody hated, and I should write something about that and make fun of myself, not other people. So again, I felt like a horrible fucking human. So I was like, okay, I can make fun of myself. So then I wrote this, and it like gained traction because it was funny and everybody hated the officer, so they thought it was
Hmm.
ironic that I guess somebody that had any type of hidden talent would use it to write something about this guy.
About the correctional officer. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But it turned into like this massive joke between like staff and everybody. But eventually it got to somebody that didn't take it as a joke. So I went to confinement and I lost that good job. And then they shipped me back to court, back into my county. And then when I was out to court for like 2 months. And then when I came back from court, they put me back in confinement, and then released me because like the investigation had just had nothing come of it. AC
So how
confinement
long were you? How
sucks.
long were you, Ginger? How long were you in confinement?
I mean, technically 87 days.
That's a long time.
Yeah, and it's
Long
AC
time.
confinement, so like you don't get any privileges in AC confinement. Like a lot of times, I didn't get my mail. They immediately took all my stuff to admin to go through it to see what I had that I wasn't supposed to have. you know,
So did you have an inappropriate relationship with the CO?
I never had a relationship with any CO. I hate that fucking title. I don't know why Ian did me like that, but there was never any relationship with a CO. I had an experience where I was in the back later on, right before I was about to be released from prison, like less than 6 months from end of sentence, where I was in the back doing a legitimate job and turned around and I had an officer expose himself to me and push himself onto me, and I
And you
didn't
didn't
know
have a
what to
relationship
do.
with
There
him.
was no fucking relationship. No, I hate that. It's so cringy to me. Anyway, um,
Anyway,
Anyway,
that
by the way, that guy got fired later because it came out that 22 women in less than 2 years had some type of sexual inappropriate contact that was
with
propositioned
him.
by that man.
And I always wonder,
Man, love that
because
I had a fucking relationship with.
yeah. So Ginger, when you get to a point of getting out of, was your life, did you feel like, because I'm assuming that you're staying sober in prison.
Yeah, I didn't use.
So how did that feel? Like, because you had been, using, you go into prison, it's a whole different environment, whole different world. But what was your, how did you feel about yourself? How did that make you feel?
I mean, it's nice to be able to say I don't have anything extra in my body, and nice to not have the physical dependency and a physical need for an opioid, and not to need to make over $115,000 a year just to pay for your dope, you know? But I physically still felt bad. I had a lot of stuff that needed to be taken care of, a lot of like physical issues that needed to be worked out. So I felt sick a lot. I felt like I hurt a lot. I felt angry. Um,
Did you have anybody when you were in there that you related to? The people that were like,
Friends in
yeah.
prison, yeah. Oh yeah. Dude, it's easy for me to make friends in places. I got like I basically keep in touch with all those people still. I've been home
Mhm.
10 years. One of my best friends is somebody that I was in that dorm with, the dorm that were with that officer. Actually about three or four of the people that I'm like super close with to this day were all in that dorm. I was
Well, I
the
know
dorm, see dorm,
Laura,
Delta.
yeah, Laura Cod, she was in a Florida prison. And she had a crazy weird
She at
deal
Lowell?
on it. What's that?
She at Lowell?
She was with people who had in her wreck incident accident, the person on the other side died. I think she got a 5-year sentence. But one of the things that she said is that obviously it was awful going to prison, but she was able to find people to relate to that were going through the same things as her, that she became very close to, because she was very guilt ridden, and just having the issue of having to go to prison and having kids and all the different things that went along with that. She also came across people who were dealing with more time and was able to find some like balance of understanding, because some of these people were through what she was going through.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely feel like the women form pseudo families,
Hmm.
whereas the men tend to form hierarchies based on power.
Yeah,
Uh,
good point. Yeah.
Women, we feel like we're connected because a lot of times women get essentially abandoned in prison. I don't know that it doesn't happen to men as well, but I feel like the stigma with women is different.
Hmm.
Like sometimes in some environment, men can get credit for going to prison, whereas a woman, it never looks good. Oh, you didn't care enough about your kids. You didn't, you know,
Let's talk about when you start getting close to the door of getting out, Ginger. What are you thinking? Like, what's the outside world going to look like to you?
I was scared.
A
I
lot of
didn't
people get
have,
scared.
I didn't really have anything I felt like to go home to other than my child, who was 2 when I left. His father and I always had a tumultuous relationship, but he was much more stable than I was, as far as like he was able to work as a good job. He's college educated,
Hmm.
and able to like keep his shit together to function enough, you know, whereas I wasn't.
Hmm.
Um, I also worried because I had community control and no license, and my parents lived in the middle of nowhere. So 9 months before I knew I was going to be released, I started pen paling. It's also how I started selling cigarettes through admid, was because I was like, well, I'm going to need the money, dude. I have no opportunity for me to make any money. And I'm going to have someone coming to my house, like looking for me, have all this stuff like over my head. Everybody's going to want me to be different when nothing has changed for the better, other than there is the absence of substances in my system.
Hmm. So you step out into that world. How did it go?
I mean, by the time I was EOS, I had over like $13,000 waiting for me through pen paling and stuff. So I cut a couple checks out via admid to myself before I was released, because I knew it would take a while for the big check to come. Um, and basically I went back to my parents' house. The first night I was there, I found a loaded needle, like up underneath, stuffed up under the dresser. It probably had at least 300 milligrams of oxy, and that sucker was solid blue. So that's just kind of like, you know, I moved out 3 weeks later. I took the cash that check, and I got a place close enough in town where I could ride a bike to work. I got a
Mm,
shitty job at Sunny's making $8.50 an hour, and had child support arrears of like $15,000.
mm,
Um, so I would ride 5 miles on a beach cruiser in the middle of July in Florida to go work in a kitchen that didn't have AC and make $8.50 an hour for 2.5 hours in the morning and about 3 hours in the evening 4 days out the week to get a $40 check.
Wow.
So it
Wow.
sucked.
It's a lot to come back. And reentry is tough regardless. I mean, even if people have a really good job that they're coming back to, reentry coming back into the world after prison is something that it's hard to plan for because you don't know how many different barriers you're going to hit to try to get to what you want to get to.
Yeah. So within 6 months of being home, I was working up at the restaurant and I poked myself with like a knife or something that was in the back. And I had like, I remember going to the bathroom and seeing like this little hole that kind of like almost looked like it had turned into like an ant bite. And
Mm.
within like a day, I had, I guess MRSA like all through my leg.
Yeah, MRSA,
Had to
an
cut it
infection.
out, and they gave me Dilaudid, and they packed it, and then they gave me some stuff to go home because I couldn't walk, and it seemed like after that, I didn't really get it out of my head that I could use again, you know. So I kind of went off and running, and then I went and did the MAT treatment program for a while, and it never really worked well for me.
What was it?
MAT treatment, like medication assisted treatment, like methadone. I
Okay.
did that. I did a low dose of methadone for a while, and I threw up every morning and felt sick and would snot out an hour after getting my dose, but we dope sick by 8 o'clock that evening. I'm a fast metabolizer, I guess. So it didn't work for me. I enrolled in school and went to cosmetology school and tried to keep it together as long as I could. I ended up relapsing because the methadone wasn't working. I was still having withdrawals and still felt like shit. And it was easier to use than it was to not use. Um, and I
Did you like the
managed.
cosmetology school? Was that something that you kind of felt
I
you had a passion for, or was that just something you were trying to fill
no,
time with?
yeah, I was filling time and I felt like I needed to do something. It was the closest school to my house because, again, I didn't have a license. I have a driver's license. So I had to depend on other people or having cab money, $40 a day, every day, when I'm in school full time, Um, I basically wanted a job where I could control my own schedule due to my medical stuff and where no one will give a shit that I was a felon with no license. And that's not a lot.
It's
There's
not a
not a
lot
lot
of
of jobs
opportunities
for that,
there.
right?
Right.
Not to mention it's not like I was college educated, you know, and I was in a small town where there were a lot of people who had connections to the person who was my victim, you know. Um, but either way, that's kind of where my mind was. So I never really enjoyed it. It's never something that I have really practiced much as a profession. And even when
Mm-hmm.
I was in cosmetology school, it was more of like, well, hey, if I don't use this as like a profession, I'll use it personally. And I always kind of leaned towards like wake up ready services, microblading, skincare,
Mm-hmm.
um, lash tint, stuff like that, than makeup or hair services.
So, Ginger, you going through all this, where you are now? How can you walk us to where how you got to where you are now?
I mean, the intervention was a big part of it. My life never would have gotten better without the opportunities that the show presented for me.
I want
Uh,
you to talk about that because I think that's a big part of your story.
so I guess around the August of 2015, they sent me a letter saying that due to my attendance rate, they were going to take my scholarship away, which I knew was coming. I knew I deserved to have that happen. And I was just like, dude, I'm not fucking doing this again. This is like a repeat of 10 years ago, bro. Like I'm not doing this again. Men were financing my drug problem by that point. Um, and I just didn't want to do it anymore. So I think that most addicts get to a point where they look at their life and start to ask if everybody would be better off without them, right?
Yep.
Um, I had gotten to a point where I knew everybody would be better off without me because every day with me was just always something. You know what I mean? I couldn't just have a normal day. And if I did have a just normal day, I was zonked out of my fucking mind.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I made a plan to write intervention, Dr. Phil, Ellen, anybody that I thought would listen and possibly gift me treatment, I wrote. And
Hmm.
I pretended to be my family because that's
Trying
what,
to intervene for you.
right, because that's what they want.
Hmm.
Um, most people don't want to hear from the addict because most of us can't decide on what we want to do and can't commit, right?
Hmm.
So, and I said that if I didn't get treatment, I was going to shoot myself in the head in the backyard. After my There's a bunch, we're all fucking Capricorns and Sagittarius in my family for the most part. So my niece's mom has a birthday December 14th. My niece's birthday is the 16th. We have Christmas the 25th. My birthday is the 27th. My best friend's birthday was the 28th. Then you got the New Year, and then you got my son's birthday on the 9th of January, right? So I wanted to be dead before another Christmas, but after my niece's birthday, because I felt like there was an acceptable week where they could go from um, transitioning from me passing to being able to move on with the holiday.
That's a
Uh,
dark thought.
it made sense in my mind, and it was the least, and I noticed, I said, like, I was to shoot myself outside because I wanted my landlord to be able to rent the house without saying if someone killed himself inside the property or inside the home. I didn't want anybody to have to come in there and clean it up. I felt like it'd be easier outside. My intervention was the day of my niece's birthday, so it was a God thing. They get like 10,000 letters a day, so the fact that anybody read mine and even cared, you know.
So how does that work, Ginger? When you get accepted into that?
For me, it took them 3 months to actually commit. So essentially, there's this process. There's all these questions. You write them. There's all these questions. And normally, I wouldn't be a part of that process, but I was the one that wrote them, pretending to be somebody else.
Hmm.
So, because I couldn't get my family on board, my family didn't really wanted anything to do with it. They want to be a part of it. My dad told me intervention would never come for me, and that if they did, it wouldn't work for me.
Hmm.
So they had already kind of decided that I wasn't worth it. I wasn't worth the time to talk to these people on the phone to get them to come out and do the show. Which is why I had to pretend.
I mean, for some of those that don't know, the intervention is a show where it deals with people who are trying and struggling to get to the off the addiction.
It's a fucking shock value show.
Yeah,
Like, it's a show. Yeah. Anyway,
yeah.
either way, so they came out. They before they came out though, they worked with me on the phone forever. And I had to like convince my family as I got farther and farther and closer to them actually coming that this was happening with or without them, even though it wouldn't have happened with them. And they didn't know that. I knew that, but I basically told them, hey, if you don't want to come on and tell your side, I'm gonna go on and I'm just gonna tell mine.
Hmm.
And I'm gonna fucking get treatment.
Hmm.
But like the day before the intervention bought their tickets, my parents decided that they would participate. Um, and they participated. I had somebody move in with me that was like one of the dudes that was financing my drug problem to say that he wrote the letter, um, to basically say that he was so concerned for me so I could get treatment that he was the one that reached out, even though I was the one.
Hmm.
I needed treatment. I had no money. They actually ended up being on my amends list because I essentially used the show in order to get free treatment. They're not the free treatment show. They're my life is so bad, my family's scared I'm gonna die, and they want me to get better show.
Hmm. Right. So how did it go?
As far as,
The show and the family and everybody
I
being
mean,
involved.
I don't. What exactly are you asking when you say how did it go? Are you asking like stepwise how did it go? Or are you asking if I think it was a good outcome?
Both.
I mean, stepwise, it was long. I asked them at one point if a lot of people died before they ever got out there, and they didn't have an answer for me. Um, I think I was kind of difficult to deal with, but I think they're kind of used to that. It's
Probably.
weird. I had somebody following me around in the bathroom every 6 hours just for I could go shoot up, you know.
Mhm.
There were situations that they wanted me to enact to present to the viewer what it would look like for certain scenarios, and like the lengths that addicts would go to get the drug, right? So
Mhm.
there were things that were shown on there that didn't necessarily happen, but
They just
could
wanted it to happen and
could
reenact
have
it.
maybe happened at a different point in time
Right.
in the right circumstances, if that
And
made
that's the
sense.
way a lot of the reality stuff
Yeah.
is they
I
create
work in
a,
TV and film now, so I understand now. It felt very personal at the time. I remember at one point I didn't really argue with them when they asked me to do stuff, even if I felt like it was wrong, because it's, in my mind, it's a free treatment show. You know, I'm getting free treatment. They want a show, I'll give you a fucking show. Just do you do, I'll do my end. You're gonna do yours. Um, and I had to fight with them a little bit for some stuff. I don't know if it was timing or me personally. They originally sent me one place that I was there for 3 weeks, and they medically discharged me and basically told him, Richard, you're going to come get her and you're going to take her somewhere else because we don't have the ability to care for her for the level of care that she needs. And then the place that they ended up sending me to in Destin, they said the reason why they didn't send me was because the facility was a super nice facility, and we buy and cook our own food, which is part of why they wanted me to go there because they thought it would be easier for me with my medical stuff to eat. They said that my family would not commit $75 a week for food for 2 months. So that was like a major factor in why they didn't send me there to start with. And then they ended up getting it. Somebody, I think, in the 12 step community heard about what's going on and donated in order to give me a Publix gift card every week so I could get food with everybody else.
wow. When
That
did,
place was great. This
yeah,
was so, like I said, my intervention was December 16th of 2015, and then the beginning of January, I came like I think this third or fourth or fifth or sixth or somewhere around there. I was in back in Destin, and like that place really helped me. I changed my thinking. I got really integrated into the 12 step community. I
yeah.
had tremendous growth at that facility, and within the rooms,
Do you think
uh,
that's when your mindset changed
yeah,
with how
absolutely,
you, yeah, yeah.
100%,
Finding the right people, the right place, the right feel.
100%. The support, I had support there that
Yeah.
I never had from strangers.
Yeah. That's so cool. That's
Yeah,
so
like
cool.
I ended up
And
moving.
you say you stay close with those people now, right?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
stay close to the people from prison, and I stay close to the people from my treatment center. Actually, anytime, like I lived in Destin after I got sober. So I went through treatment. I was there for 2 months. I got really integrated into the community because it was like a PHP, it's like a parcel hospitalization program. Um, so you're like in and out of the community with other
Yeah.
people, doing, 12 step and stuff like that. Um, After that, I was gifted sober living again by somebody who had heard about my experience with the show, off of the show.
That's
They
great.
got me linked up with somebody else
You
to
didn't
get me.
even know who it was.
I
You
do
know
know,
now, probably. Yeah.
I knew at the time.
But
They told
before
me.
that happened,
Yeah, she
yeah.
reached out to me. They contacted me because I had been promised a sober living via somebody on intervention staff, and they meant it. They were willing to do it, and intervention show accepted and said, "Hey, you can't do that. It's a conflict of interest. You can't
But
pay."
Ginger, I think the thing I just think the thing that's so interesting about your story is it seems like, and I said this with the beginning, each and every time it seems like you're at the end. I mean,
Yeah,
truly
you
at the,
feel like, oh, shit's gonna change. Yeah,
yeah. But you actually somehow didn't give up on yourself. You thought about it. I mean, you thought about it. You thought you were going to end it. You were going to be very thoughtful in your suicide and all those different things. But you continue to reach out and try to find help for yourself, and then you finally found it in this place in Destin, which I think maybe that's why your story and why you're sharing it means so much to people who are struggling. Is that it was not easy for you at all. And I can see from the emotion that you talk about as you relive these are things that are real to you, but you've now been sober. For how long?
So I don't say that I am sober because of my medical marijuana vape. I don't have a sobriety date because of that.
Right.
I did do over 2 years, almost 3 years of totally sober, no substances. I don't even drink caffeine other than sweet tea now. I didn't drink it then. Like I never, nothing, no
As you
prescriptions,
see my Diet Mountain Dew bottle here.
no, nothing, right?
Yeah.
And then I got to a point in sobriety where I was doing all the emotional work. I was going to the meetings. I was working with another addicts. I was reaching out. I was calling people. I was showing up. And then I started to really focus on my body because I had so much pain.
Hmm.
I got to a point where I was willing to kill myself in sobriety, or I was going to put a needle back in my neck because
Hmm.
of the pain that I was experiencing. There were days where, and by this time I had won my appeal. Right. This is like we're in like
Right.
20,
To get your driver's license back. Yeah.
yeah, we're in 2018 now, right? I'm now living in Destin. I've been in Destin area for like 2 years, with all my sober support and all my community, and I have a really good life. I got married, to a man that was a really good, understanding man, no trauma, no drug history, like fucking normal.
Just a
Never,
normal guy.
yeah, never been
Well, the
abused.
opposites attract, right, Ginger?
It's so funny at one point because that I'll never forget this, right? We're at a meeting and it was a heavy meeting. It was like adult children of alcoholics. I don't know if you've ever looked at that book or have anybody experienced that. That's like probably the hardest thing because it's like looking at a mirror and it's basically told me that all the things that I thought were so unique and so special about me were isms
Hmm.
and were basically side effects of trauma, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but we were outside of this meeting and like me and this small group of probably five other people are crying because we're talking about being abused as children, and most of it was like sexual or whatever. And
Yeah.
Doug walks up and he's always like trying to lighten the air, and he goes, "Man, I must have been a really ugly kid because no one ever tried to abuse me."
Oh my
I was like,
God.
"Go to the car, go to the car right now." But everybody laughed because they knew
You
him.
have to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, at least
Lighten
they
the mood.
do it for me. But either way, it so it's interesting that you comment on how hard it was for me
Hmm.
because I think a lot of people feel like it was easy, because of the show, but also a lot of people. It's one thing for me to tell you that I did these crazy things. You'd be like, "Oh yeah, sure you did." It's another
Hmm.
thing to sit down and watch an hour of it on international television, right?
Hmm.
Especially with what was on there because I felt
How
like
did you feel about what was on there, though, Ginger? Were you like, "That's
I've never.
me"?
It's disgusting. It's weird.
Yeah.
A lot. It's weird too looking back at it because I know which scenarios actually happened and which ones were for
Yeah. How
TV.
long did it actually happen? Like from when you got accepted into the show?
I mean,
What was that?
it took a months to say, "Hey, we booked a flight. We're actually coming." But
Right.
normally they follow someone around for anywhere from a week to 3 weeks. They only needed 5 days with me.
The Ginger show. Oh, it
They
was only 5 days.
They only needed 5 days of my bullshit, and they were like, "We're gonna take a break early. We're gonna cut for Christmas." I said, "Yeah, we gotta win an episode here, buddy."
This
You
is
know,
real reality.
the worse
Uh,
it is, the better the ratings are. You
okay,
know?
so Ginger, because of what you're doing now, and you got into acting in that, do you think that fed into that? Do you think that getting around the camera and doing that is
Oh,
no,
absolutely not. No,
no?
no.
What got you? What? Where? Tell people what you're doing up to today.
I mean, I always wanted to be in TV and film or model as a kid.
Hmm.
After I had London in 2019, we moved from Destin to Charleston to try to keep the family together because Doug, London's dad, is a merchant marine. So he's a chief engineer on like these big ships. So he'd be gone
Hmm.
for 6 months out the year. It's really hard for a family, especially when the mom's an recovering addict. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? It's still always going to be crazy. Um, so we basically moved to Charleston and try to keep the family together. And like within 3 weeks of us moving out there, we realized that he was going to end up being a chief over in New Orleans. So he left like immediately, and I had to
Mhm.
set up this house with this baby. But it kind of worked out because I started a modeling portfolio out there. I got in connection with a lot of different photographers. And then when I got out here, I actually had a portfolio, and somebody at the gym saw me in London one day and came in and started talking to us and asked me if I'd ever thought about being in film and TV. And I said that I had, I just didn't know how to do it. And he gave me a card and told me what agency to go to and what website to basically sign up for. And I was on set of a BET TV show less than a week later.
Wow, that doesn't usually happen like that. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, my first audition ever, I booked a Super Bowl commercial. I didn't even know
Yeah.
it was a Super Bowl commercial. I've had people that have told me they've been in TV and film 10 years, have never been invited to audition. Never
Yeah.
mind, have booked. Over 3,000 people auditioned for that job, and they had like 8 lead spots, and I was one of the first people they booked.
Yeah, and I think there's something to the fact too of having the confidence to go audition. You know, a lot of people will take acting classes and theater and that and they're afraid to put themselves out there because they're, you know, afraid of the rejection. But I think you're a unique soul, Ginger, is you're not afraid to put yourself out there because you've lived through um, a lot of different things that would put you in a mindset that, hey, I'm just going to do this. I'm going to make it happen. Give me an opportunity, I'll make it happen.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
I
what's
want,
the worst that can happen? You guys
oh
don't
yeah, what's
mess
the
with
worst
me
that could
back.
happen? Exactly,
It's like
exactly.
my
Which is a great mindset, by the way, because you know if we had more people that weren't afraid to fail, they could do a lot of things that they want to do. That's the whole idea of nightmare success is you got to walk through your fears and your unknowns to get out of your comfort zone to get to something that you want,
yeah.
your own personal success. But Ginger, what do you think where you sit now, where you sit now, what you've been through, what do you think would be one of your bigger takeaways through what your life experience has been?
To stop letting other people decide who I am and what my life will be. I listened
That's a,
so long to so many people that like I'm the type of person I surround myself with people that don't want me to succeed. I did that for so long
yeah,
because I felt obligated to people. That's another thing. I'll be honest, Ian, a little fucker, Ian's the one that kind of made me realize that it's really hard for me to let people go. I tend to grow very quickly in an exponential rate once I'm ready to grow. And
yeah,
I tend to try to drag people with me because I
hmm,
feel like I owe them something, right? Because, well, you were there when shit wasn't good, or like, I know what you're going through. We're
hmm,
buddies, like, I can help you,
hmm,
but you have to be willing to help yourself. So I try to
yes,
drag people who I don't want to change. I like my life the way it is, but in order for my life to stay the way it is, you can't grow talking to me.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
can't, like, being stagnant is like death for me
yeah,
because I get bored when I'm complacent. I get bored when I'm not challenged. And it's really easy for me to think about like to let chronic pain seep in when I don't have shit, when I have shit that like I don't have to necessarily show up and put on a face for.
hmm,
When there are some days where I literally just can't. Like, no matter what
hmm,
it is I have planned, it's not fucking happening. And then there's other days where I feel like it's worse if I change my schedule to comfort myself. If that makes
hmm,
sense.
yeah, it does. But I mean, I think what you're doing and as busy as you're keeping yourself and doing what you like doing, you know, that's the other part of it. You know, Ginger, you're traveling around telling your story and doing the things that you like doing that you care about. And I think that's what also keeps you on the right path. If anybody wants to get a hold of you, Ginger, how do they find Ginger?
Instagram at Lil underscore red underscore Wulff Wuff. I'm on Facebook. I'm on TikTok. Um,
You're everywhere.
yeah, just reach out. People reach out all the time and they're like, oh, wow, you responded. Oh, why wouldn't I? I'm not a celebrity. Nobody knows me. You know what I mean? I'm a human being. And even if I was, I would
I
eventually.
think even if you become a famous celebrity, you'll still be touching on and reaching out to people that are reaching for you because I
Yeah.
think you want to help people with your story. Um, and if people try to get a hold of me, I'm brentcassidy.com. at my website. Loving you guys with the Apple reviews. That's such a big deal. Don't forget to subscribe and like, comment, and don't forget about the book. I've got that book. If you're looking for a
Oh,
book to
I
read,
want the book.
Nightmare
You said
Success. Get it on.
book.
Yeah, get it on. Where do you get it? Barnes and Noble and Amazon.
Okay.
So for those, when I was writing my emails back and forth from Leavenworth, stay strong. I'll do the same. Ginjer, thank you so much for today. Appreciate you sharing your story.
Thanks for having me.
Nightmare Success, in and out.